In 1974, a Japanese soldier walked out of the jungle and surrendered. The problem was, the war had ended nearly 3 decades earlier. He had been fighting an enemy that no longer existed. It began with a decision made during the final days of World War II. Part 1. A different kind of order. In 1944, Japan was losing the Pacific War. American forces were advancing steadily across island after island, tightening their control and cutting supply routes. It was during this desperate stage that 22-year-old Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda was sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines. Unlike many Japanese soldiers who were trained to die in direct combat, Onoda had been trained in intelligence and guerrilla tactics. His mission was to hide in the jungle, sabotage enemy airstrips and supply lines, and gather information for as long as possible. Before he left, his commanding officer gave him a final instruction that would define the rest of his life. You are not to surrender under any circumstances, even if Japan appears to lose, even if you are the last man alive. You will continue the mission. For Onoda, this was not motivational rhetoric. It was a binding command from a superior officer. Part 2. The war ends, but suspicion begins. In August 1945, after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan formally surrendered. Emperor Hirohito announced the end of the war in a historic radio broadcast. Across Asia, Japanese troops laid down their weapons. On Lubang Island, leaflets were dropped from airplanes announcing the surrender and instructing remaining soldiers to come down from the mountains. Onoda and the 3 soldiers hiding with him studied the leaflets carefully. Instead of relief, they felt doubt. The documents could easily have been created by Allied forces as psychological warfare. They had been trained to expect deception, forged documents, and enemy tricks. If they surrendered too easily, they would be failing their mission. More attempts followed over the years. Newspapers showing a rebuilt Japan, photographs of family members, even messages recorded by relatives. Each time, Onoda analyzed the information through the same lens. If the war were truly over, why had no officer come directly to relieve him of duty? Without that confirmation, surrender felt like betrayal. Part 3. Survival turns into a way of life. At first, Onoda was not alone. 3 other soldiers remained with him in the jungle. They survived by stealing rice from local farmers, eating coconuts and bananas, and constructing hidden shelters deep in the forest. Occasionally, they clashed with Philippine police or villagers, believing they were still fighting enemy forces. Years passed. In 1950, one of the soldiers surrendered, convinced the war had ended. The remaining 3 continued hiding. In 1954, one was killed in a firefight. In 1972, the last companion was shot during another confrontation. By then, nearly 3 decades had passed since Japan's surrender. Onoda was alone, but his discipline never faded. He cleaned his rifle regularly, he mended his uniform, he followed military routines as if headquarters were still watching. The jungle was no longer a temporary hiding place. It had become his entire world. Every distant gunshot reinforced his belief that global conflict continued. The absence of direct orders only strengthened his resolve to remain loyal. Part 4. A man living in 1944. While Onoda remained hidden, the world transformed completely. Japan rebuilt from devastation into an economic powerhouse. Cities were reconstructed, technology advanced rapidly, humans landed on the moon. The Cold War reshaped global politics. Entire generations were born who knew World War II only from history books. Yet Onoda remained mentally anchored to the final command he had received in 1944. He was not unaware of time passing. He simply interpreted everything through the assumption that the war had evolved, not ended. From his perspective, enemy forces controlled the island, and Japan was still fighting somewhere beyond the horizon. His isolation was not driven by madness, but by unwavering loyalty. To surrender without direct authorization would mean disobeying his superior officer. In his mind, obedience was more important than comfort, safety, or even time itself. Part 5. Loyalty versus Truth. In 1974, a young Japanese traveler named Norio Suzuki deliberately set out to find him. Suzuki believed that Onoda was still alive and hiding. Against expectations, he succeeded. When they met, Onoda did not react with shock or confusion. He was calm, cautious, and still armed. Suzuki told him the war had ended decades earlier. Onoda listened but remained firm. He would surrender only if his original commanding officer personally ordered him to do so. The Japanese government located the former officer, now an elderly man working in civilian life. He traveled to Lubang Island and formally relieved Onoda of his mission. Only then did Onoda lower his weapon. After 29 years in the jungle, he stepped into a modern world that barely resembled the one he had left. For most of humanity, World War II ended in 1945. For Hiroo Onoda, it ended in 1974. His story is not about stubbornness. It is about unwavering commitment, about a soldier who honored his orders with a level of discipline few could imagine. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.